next move on to Urja Parikh. And Urja is master's student in biomedical sciences, and she's studying in Mumbai, India. And the title of her talk is Current Status of Nanomedicine in Global Stoma Multiform, a Systematic Review. Um, so, um, yeah, Urja, it's all yours.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to be speaking about the current status of nanomedicine in glioblastoma multiforme. So we performed a systematic review and the paper was co-authored by Dr. Rishikesh Sarkar. So glioblastoma is a primary brain tumor which is classified by WHO as a grade 4 astrocytoma and is associated with a very poor prognosis and an overall survival of a mere 15 months after diagnosis and therapy. Without therapy, a patient may only survive for up to 3 months or slightly more. Nanotechnology is an up-and-coming field which studies nanoparticles and its applications in various fields of science. In cancer biology, nanotechnology has been exploited for diagnosis, imaging, and even therapy. Nanoparticles usually range from 1 to 100 nanometers in size, and a nanometer is 1 billionth of a meter. Okay, so in this image, I have displayed how nanoparticles can be exploited to treat a glioblastoma tumor, which usually arises in the subventricular zone of the brain. Owing to its small size, the nanoparticles can easily cross the blood-brain barrier. Also, because of its high surface area, it can be conjugated with multiple antibodies that can bind to tumor antigens. Another interesting property of nanotherapy is enhanced permeability and retention effect that is seen in tumors. Because of leaky angiogenesis, which is a major hallmark of cancer, the nanoparticles can easily diffuse through the tumors and be retained within the tumors because of lack of lymphatic drainage. So because of this, the nanoparticles get enough time to act on the tumors and induce apoptosis or necrosis in these tumors. So the cytotoxicity could be imparted because of the nanoparticle itself or because it carries certain drugs like temozolomide, cytarabine, or doxorubicin that induces apoptosis in these cells. In figure C, you can see the relative size of nanoparticles, which is much smaller as compared to the other cells in the body. So the aim of the study was to understand the advances of nanotechnology in treating GBM in humans. We all know that in preclinical studies, nanotechnology has shown vast promise and amazing results. However, we do not know the efficacy of nanotechnology in human patients, for which we performed a systematic review. So we collected all relevant clinical trials from databases such as PubMed, Cochrane Library, clinicaltrials.gov, and Google Scholar between 2001 and 2020. We got around 24 papers, of which 11 were excluded because they were ongoing clinical trials, had been terminated because of life-threatening side effects, or the trials were completed, but the results had not been posted. After which we were left with 13 studies, of which 3 were excluded because they did not match the inclusion criteria. The inclusion criteria set for this paper were that the patients must be greater than 18 years of age, and the patient should be alive while the studies were carried out. So autopsy studies were excluded. Also, the follow-up period should be more than 8 months. Finally, we were left with 10 studies that were included in the qualitative synthesis. So the 3 most common nanoparticles that were observed were superparamagnetic iron oxide nanoparticles, also known as pions, which have a magnetic core. This can be exploited by stimulating these nanoparticles with magnetic field, and it can induce hypothermia in the tumor tissue, causing necrosis or death of tumor tissue. Ribosome is another popular nanoparticle that can encapsulate drugs within the aqueous layer, and it can also be coated with polyethylene glycol that stabilizes its properties and also increases the therapeutic index of the drug. The ribosomes can also carry human genes like the interferon beta gene that can be transported to tumors to kill the cells. A novel technology that was exploited in one of the studies was mini-cell. Mini-cells are basically bacterial cells derived from Salmonella typhimurium, which act as nanoparticles within themselves and can attach tumor antigens and induce immune responses. Further, drugs can also be encapsulated within these mini-cells. So we had a total of 220 patients evaluated in the systematic review, of which 66 belong to the primary GBM subgroup and 159 to the recurrent GBM subgroup. The baseline characteristics were studied. So we saw that more males than females were affected. The median age of the population was 53.25 years. Molecular markers such as MGMT promoter methylation, EGFR expression, MDR1, MRP proteins were molecular markers that indicated poor prognosis of good prognosis of glioblastoma, whereas markers such as TNF-alpha, IL-1, beta, IL-6 were poor prognostic markers. The time of induction of therapy also varied from study to study. Basically, the nanotherapy clinical trial started after 1 to 16 months in primary GBM patients, whereas in recurrent GBM patients, they started between 6 months and 13 months, which is 24 to 54 weeks. It was also seen that all these patients who were included in the clinical trial for nanotherapy also underwent prior treatment, such as surgery, radiation, chemotherapy, and immunotherapy, because of which the sole effect of nanotherapy was not evaluated in these studies. The median KPS, which is the Karnofsky Performance Scale, was also shown, which is an indicator of the quality of life. So higher the KPS value, better is the quality of life. For the same, for the primary GBM patient sample, it was 90, and for recurrent GBM, 80. The outcome measures that were evaluated were duration of treatment, which were very vaguely given in the papers, but mostly were for 8 weeks. The follow-up period also varied across studies, but were greater than 8 months. The median overall survival was the primary outcome measure evaluated in this study, which showed how long a patient survives after nanotherapy treatment. In primary GBM patients, the survival period was 6.75 months, and for recurrent GBM, 9.7 months. Overall, the overall survival was 8.2 months. MGMT methylation, which is a good prognostic marker of GBM, was also evaluated in a very few number of patients, of which 46.5% were positive and had a longer overall survival. The mean progression-free survival, which basically indicates the time before which a recurrent tumor occurs, was quite low for primary GBM, which was 2.3 months. The rate for the same was 30.2%. In recurrent GBM, we saw that it took 3.92 months before another tumor recurred in the brain, and the rate was 8.2%. Overall, we saw that 19.2% was the progression-free survival rate, and 3.11 months was the period before a tumor recurred. The median KPS was also evaluated after treatment. However, this parameter was not given in most studies. So after treatment of primary GBM, the KPS reduced, that is the quality of life reduced, whereas in recurrent GBM, the quality of life improved after nanotherapy when it increased to 90 from 80. McDonald's criteria was another parameter that was evaluated. CR stands for complete response and basically indicates that the tumor has regressed completely and will not be shown on an image or like a CT scan. PR stands for partial response and SD for stable disease. So it was seen that the complete response was far more relevant in primary GBM tumors than in recurrent GBM tumors. The results were also compared with bevacizumab, which is an anti-tumor therapy. It was seen that bevacizumab had larger trials with larger number of patients, and also the overall survival was far more than what we could observe for nanotherapy, as indicated in the red boxes. The side effect profiles were also seen. It was shown that 35 adverse side effects were seen in total between primary and recurrent GBM. The life-threatening side effects were pulmonary embolism, cerebral edema, pneumonia, mucositis, hypophosphatemia, and thermal stress was also induced in the brain that caused severe cerebral edema when the nanoparticle was applied to the surgical cavity. The most common side effects were myelotoxicity, vomiting and nausea, and palmoplantar erythrodysesthesia, which is basically rashes seen on the palms and the soles. It was also seen that recurrent GBM patients saw far more severe side effects as compared to primary GBM patients, and the incidence of side effects was larger in recurrent GBM. So what we observed from this study was that no standard protocol was followed across studies, because of which we observed a huge data gap, and we could not analyze the outcome measures across these studies, because of which we were not able to perform a meta-analysis. However, from the results that we got, we could conclude the nanotechnology does improve the overall survival in patients, especially in the recurrent GBM patients, as compared to the primary GBM patients. It is possible that the primary GBM patients had very aggressive tumors owing to the location of the tumor or because of the molecular or immunological profile. We also noticed that the sample size was very small, and we need larger studies or multi-center clinical trials with all trials following a standardized protocol universally in order to get proper results and in order for anybody to do a meta-analysis to get better results to evaluate the efficacy of nanotherapy. It was also seen that bevacizumab, although improves the overall survival of the patients far better than nanotherapy, bevacizumab also causes a lot of side effects, which are far more severe as compared to nanotherapy. And therefore, nanotherapy can also be considered as good an alternative as bevacizumab for treating glioblastoma cancers. To conclude, the median overall survival for 225 patients was 8.2 months. The progression-free survival rate was 19.2%, and the mean progression-free survival was 3.11 months. The quality of life improved overall after nanotherapy, and that nanotechnology is at the moment only an adjunct therapy and cannot be used solely for the treatment of glioblastoma. Therefore, new and standardized protocols must be developed in order to firstly get homogeneous results and to understand the efficacy of nanotherapy in humans. Yes. I would like to thank Dr. Hrishikesh Sarkar for mentoring me while writing this paper. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Uja. Thanks a lot. Very nice talk. So we have almost on time. So we could have one quick question from audience. Is there anyone who wants to ask question? Please go ahead. Okay, maybe I could ask. So one of the things is, what was the how old the tumors were at the time of the treatment? So did you look at that? So because I didn't see that you, yeah.
Right. So that part was the time of induction of therapy. So it was seen that most of the patients had already undergone prior treatment before they started the clinical trial for nanotherapy. So it so happened that some patients, the tumor was as old as 1 month, or it also was 12 or 13 months old when the nanotherapy clinical trial started. So there was no inclusion criteria set for these clinical trials where they only included tumors that were of a certain age. So there was a lot of variability and heterogeneity even observed for the age of the tumor.
Yeah, because that would mean the survival rates and all that. Okay, good. So we are very on time. So thanks a lot. Ujay. It was great talk. You did cover a lot of information in that. It was a new topic for me, and I learned a lot. Thank you. Okay, so this brings us.